two words are key. First word is individuality, and the second word is holism. What I mean by individuality is that 10 people can have the same so-called medical diagnosis, but by the time you actually spend an hour getting proper information about all the other things that might be going on, such as other signs and symptoms, medical history, and never mind family history and psychosocial history, you find that that medical diagnosis is but the only thing they have in common, and that medical diagnosis is based upon one or two dominant signs or symptoms which pertain to a particular part of the body, but the rest of the body doesn't enter the picture, the equation. And so doing things that way, calling sets of symptoms names, and then sticking that name on to a person doesn't respect their individuality. Now, that's maybe offensive philosophically, but clinically it just makes things less effective. That's its real problem. My experience is that you can't treat diseases. You can treat people. But if you try to treat a disease, it just doesn't work because your focus is so narrow. For instance, let's take an example. Let's use the medical diagnosis called asthma. It's come up a couple of times. That word refers to a particular set of symptoms. And it has to do with lungs. It has to do with a certain kind of constrictive quality that the lungs have. And if that's present, then the word asthma is used. And so once the word asthma is used, it's understood that it's a lung phenomena, it's a constrictive lung phenomena, then obviously what do? We somehow open up the lungs and no more asthma. And so effort is put into looking for natural substances or synthesizing chemical substances which open up the lungs. But the connection to everything else is lost in the process. And my experience is that when you take a complete case history, though the diagnosis is asthma, one person may have very loose stools along with it, the other person may suffer constipation. And those things are related. Now, so without utilizing individuality, there's a great danger of treating diseases rather than people. And when that's done, things just don't work as well clinically. In fact, side effects happen. But from another point of view, really, there is no such thing as side effects. Side effects are just an excuse for improper diagnosis and improper prescribing. For instance, a drug and an herb, anything has a particular set of effects, and they're known. So asthma drugs have a certain effect on the lungs, but they also have 10 other effects on the body which are clearly known. Now, it would be best if an in-depth, overall, complete diagnosis was done, and a substance which actually had the 10 properties that were required by the person's 10 things, if those were matched, there would be no such thing as side effects. But as long as we stick to this concept of something has main effects and then there's side effects, and we walk into a scenario where we excuse side effects, really it's just improper prescribing is what's going on. If one can be very careful in matching a therapeutic substance with the person's overall need, and if the match is just so, then the side effects are simply not there. They're not part of the picture because the match has been made. And this is impossible without taking individuality into account. So there are herbal substances which have an effect on the lungs as well to open them up. But they also have an effect on the gut as well. So, and there are a number of herbal substances which have an effect on the lungs to open them up, but some of them are able to affect the gut in one way versus another way. And so the most intelligent and the most artful thing to do is to match what needs to be done with what it is that's at hand. So you have to understand the herbal substances in good detail, and you have to understand the person in good detail, and then the matching can occur. And when that occurs, uh, the healing process is so smooth that people get better without falling to the left and then falling to the right and getting back up and so on. It is very smooth when it's done that way. And I speak from experience, so it's not just theory. I've seen this for about 10 years now. If you take that kind of care and time, things work better. Second word is holism. And holism is another way of saying that nothing exists all by itself unconnected to everything else. Things are connected. So again, using the asthma diagnosis as an example, there is a relationship between lungs and intestines. And simply aiming at the lungs and ignoring other things in the body is also not very artful. It's really not good enough. It's, in my opinion, very sloppy medicine. So holism looks at the connections between things. So again, when an overall case history is done, you know, how the gut is functioning, what digestion's like, what elimination's like, what the lungs are like, what the immune system is like, what the energy is like, what the nervous system tension is like, what's the muscle tension like. And there are many other things that are, you know, that I could refer to, which are particular to approaches such as homeopathic medicine or Chinese medicine or Indian medicine. For instance, in Chinese medicine, there's a knowledge of the body that's very different than the knowledge of the body that exists in Western medicine. There is a network of meridians, and you'll see some charts. No, they're in my office now, but you might have seen acupuncture meridian charts. And there is understood that there's a relationship between certain points in the body with certain internal function. And so the connections are so many and so great that the more one studies, the more one looks for connections, the more one finds them to be there. So it becomes more and more unacceptable to treat something as if it exists all by itself. It can cause further problems, because then you're not sure what else you might set off, because you haven't looked at what else is connected to what's going on. And so this is the philosophical difference between what I would call holistic medicine and so-called modern medicine. Modern medicine is wonderful for acute crisis prevention or treatment, but to look at chronic patterns, it tends to focus on one thing and not look at what else it might be connected to, and therefore misses a larger picture. So to encapsulate this, I would ask you to just remember one phrase, and it will bring a lot of this back. And that phrase is this part of a larger pattern? Anytime you come across something, anything at all, if you simply ask that question, you'll come to a new understanding of it. So if we go back to asthma as an example, the lungs get constricted. If we ask the question, is this part of a larger pattern? Well, the larger pattern may be that it's seasonal. The larger pattern may be that it's diet related, or it's related to nervous system tension and emotionality. We could say, okay, we've gotten some idea. Is this part of a larger pattern yet? And the larger pattern may involve family dynamics. Okay, that the asthma tends to come on for a young child when you know, mommy and daddy are having a fight, or they're themselves going through a stressful period. That's when the asthma attacks occur even more. Okay, and these things are actually fairly common. Being human beings, we're affected by all these things. And if you look for these things, you see that they are part of what actually ends up triggering things sometimes. So you find lots and lots of factors, and this whole idea of wondering, is this part of a larger pattern? You get a lot of information that way. And Chinese medicine and Indian medicine in particular are very good at asking this question over and over and over again. So for instance, the symptom is constriction of lungs. In Chinese medicine, is this part of a larger pattern? Well, that larger pattern will involve certain points in the body which are tender. Okay? So the body gets brought into something, into things as well. So there are many, many ways of appreciating what goes on. We go from raw data, which is pure symptoms. Lungs get tight. And we try to understand what is that connected to? What pattern is this? What is holding this pattern in place? And how to shift this pattern. Okay, once you've understood it that way, then it's fairly simple to shift things, provided there's some discipline to do certain things that are recommended. But once you've understood it clearly, it's fairly simple to shift virtually anything in a fairly timely fashion, especially if you involve diet, herbal medicine, and body. If the body is also involved, then it becomes very, very quick. I'll give you an example in terms of asthma. I had a young man, he came in to see me, and his complaint was asthma, which he'd had since childhood. And in this case, the manifestations are so severe that every year, for many years, for the month of May, he's in the hospital a couple of times with it. And I worked with him for just about a month, and he didn't go to the hospital this year in May. And in fact, his asthma symptoms are virtually gone. But it involved a lot more than pointing out an herb to him, you know, or pointing out a drug as the doctors had done. So here's an example where it's very severe asthma, and in a month, it's just not there anymore. Because it was understood what it is that brings us on. Now, there are many, many factors that hold things in place. Diet is crucial. So let's begin with the whole idea of diet, because it'll affect virtually any medical diagnosis that a person might have.